Welcome to the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm your host, Robin L. Owens, PhD, and this is where we dive in each week to give advice, tools, and tips for high-achieving women who have written books that make a difference for people while at work. I am a professor, and when I'm not doing that, I am speaking, writing, coaching, and teaching high-achieving women who have written books how to make a bigger difference, have more impact, and more purpose with their books. Okay, let's dive in. Before we get started with the episode, I want to ask you a question. Is your book ready to be turned into a successful online course? That's a question so many people have asked me. And so I decided to create a free resource to answer that very question. I took the time-tested process that I use for turning books into successful online courses, and I created a checklist that you can review and check off so you know the ways in which your book can be turned into a successful online course. So just head on over to createmasterfulcourses.com, createmasterfulcourses.com, and get your free checklist there. All right, now let's get to the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and you take time to listen into the podcast. I say it all the time, and I will say it over and over again because I really do appreciate you, because you help the podcast be ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes, which is a podcast search engine. So thank you for doing that. And I really appreciate you. And if you want to do one more thing, love it if you would just rate, subscribe, review to the podcast. It'll help us keep it going. All right. Now, today I'm talking with Yvette Durazo. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Yvette. Yvette is the author of the book, Conflict Intelligence, the missing piece to turbocharge leaders and organizations' emotional intelligence. And I can't wait to hear more about that. Yvette is the principal consultant at Unitive Consulting and a workplace organizational effectiveness and conflict management and leadership development firm. And if that's not enough, Yvette is a professor for the University of California, Santa Cruz, Silicon Valley Extension. And she's a certified HR manager, management mediator, restorative justice facilitator, and a nonviolence communication specialist, and so much more, which we'll hear about soon. Welcome, Yvette Durazo.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robin, for inviting me over to your podcast and to your audience to listen to what I have to say.
So glad to have you here as a guest on the show today. Now, you heard me read some of your bio, right? So why don't you tell us in your own words about who you are and then about the work you do?
Well, you got great way to say my name, but the name of my company is Unitive.
Unitive.
Yes, it actually has it has a theological meaning to what I do, and it is part of what it's written on the book about 3 different levels of consciousness, people. And the unitive, it's a level of consciousness in which individuals are in peace within themselves and with the universe or God. And they're in such a level of peace that it's not that they don't experience conflict, but the way that they deal with the day-to-day and the day-to-day interactions with people, it's very peaceful, and they don't become reactive to whatever is happening around them, right? And that is the idea about also the book, about how to help individuals not to fear conflict, but rather to lean in and see it as an opportunity. So that's about me. And then a little bit more is that I also teach not only for UC Santa Cruz Extension, I also teach for UC Davis and Portland State University. And in there, I teach courses in everything that has to do with alternative dispute resolution, which includes mediation, negotiation, peace building, and you name it. And on top of that, I'm also bringing this field of work into the HR field, because our HR departments are places where employees really fear to go and seek for support. And it is because HR has done a great job in doing policy procedures, but not necessarily about really bringing the human side of the company into alignment with working together with all the policy and procedures, but also people working together.
Ah, I see. So is your primary work with HR departments, or how do you do your work?
Not necessarily. I work with many of the directors, C-level suite people. I also work with managers, supervisors, particularly because the higher the people go into leadership, the more they tend to work with people and the more they realize that the people skills are extremely essential. And especially leaders that recognize that conflict in the workplace can be a toxic energy. Those are the ones that most likely will invite me over to come in, do an assessment of the organization, and identify ways in with the work that I do, I can bring in more positiveness into the culture of the organization, more
Uh,
inclusiveness, more feeling of belonging with
yeah,
the work that I do.
yeah. So how did you come to do this work?
I fell in love with a master's degree in negotiation and peace building. And when I finished up my degree, I started Googling jobs with those titles. And there was nothing that I could find, believe it or not, almost 12, 13 years ago, there was nothing in there. But I know, and I knew for a fact that there's always conflict in organizations. Why? Because I myself deal with a lot of issues in the workplace. I was in situations and where I was being bullied, where I experienced cliques at work. I I remember hearing microaggressions, but back in the day I didn't know what they were called, but they were pointy and hurtful. And especially coming from Latino culture and where I have an accent, I noticed that that didn't work so much on my favor in many instances when I was working for organizations. Because even though that I was born and raised in San Diego, California, border town to Mexico, and I went to school in the United States, you still can hear an accent, right? And that's when I learned all about implicit and explicit bias and all of that personal experience. And together with a master's degree, I blend all of that in and I said, you know what? If 80% of our waking hours, we're spending it inside the workplace. And even though that right now we're working online, you're still dealing with workplace situations. What if I can be a catalyst or a support for organizations to create better environments so that people can come in and do what they do well and what they do great and not worry about having issues with people, right? Because I don't know about you, but the majority of people, including me, and as I remember, people fear conflict, kind of like the same way that people will fear to go into doing public speaking,
Yeah,
right? So because of that, I said, I want to bring possibilities and opportunities so that conflict can be a transformational energy that can help organizations. But I know that organizations and people don't know how to do this, right? So that is where I developed a book about my methodology of how to lead people to become those leaders that are conflict intelligent.
yeah,
Also, I experienced firsthand that first conflict intelligent leader as I was growing up. That was my father. And he didn't have any education whatsoever. He was an orphan at the age of 7, worked extremely hard, and he became a successful businessman that everybody adored, respected, and employees were loyal. I got to experience that firsthand. And then I also have my own experience going on to the workplace and having sometimes the opposite of that. So within that, I said, you know what? If we have well-meaning, educated people in the workplace, why is it that they cannot be good servant leaders and leaders that people admire, just like my dad? And with all of that combination of everything, it created an explosive passion for this field. And I love what I do. And I just wish that I can do more. And I am very grateful that you're inviting me to your podcast, because that is the only way that I can reach out to organizations, because a lot of people either don't know what I do, or they don't know that there's professionals that exist that are in the field of work and that are fully neutral, right? That can come into these organizations and can see perhaps things that leaders are not looking at, that is depleting their bottom line without even knowing. You know, there has been many occasions that whenever HR people come to me to hire me to do a mediation, I typically will ask. They want mediation, they want training, and I ask, so what is your budget? Many of them would say, we don't have a budget for that. We were not expecting things like that to happen, and that we were going to need this service. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Because leaders think that HR are the ones that should be dealing with these type of things. But unfortunately, their mechanism of working things out is very punitive, right? It's either you follow policies and procedures or you're exit out. We get rid of you. Or they investigate and, okay, the person didn't break out any policies and procedures, so they didn't do any wrong. And then they leave things as they are, already damaged and affected by the people that were in conflict. And then nothing gets done. And people continue to follow and deal with the misery that eventually creates toxicity in the environment, not only for the people involved, but those bystanders that are around them. And on top of that, it reduces the focus that people need in order to do the work that they're coming to do in organizations.
Yes, and it's very important work. Like you say, there's something in between, just looking at your own experience and your model from your father, which was a wonderful model of peace, right? And
Yeah.
then having your own experiences with conflict, and to the extreme of some of these organizations that you're working with, they have toxic environments or some level of toxicity. There's a whole range in between. So I think this is really important work that you're doing, especially now. And as you say, we spend so much time at work. The majority of our time is at work and with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're miserable, that's unhealthy for everyone. My whole work is part of the driving force is because my mother, who, when I was in high school, I heard many, many times by the time I was in high school, how much she hated her job and the impact of that on her. Now, it wasn't from the environment necessarily, but still, I'm talking about the impact of work and the importance of having what you want for workplaces. And she had wanted to go to college after high school and become a teacher, but because her family couldn't afford it, she didn't have a choice. So she ended up just taking a job that she could take and worked in a factory for 35 years and hated it for 35 years.
Wow.
And as a teenager, that's when I was kind of old enough to really see and recognize what was going on. I could see the impact on her physically and mentally, besides the fact that she would talk about it all the time, And so when I was at that age, I had made a declaration. I said, when I grow up, I'm going to have a job that's meaningful and has fulfillment for me to the best that I can. Like if I can at all, I'm going to make sure I have that. And so then it took me on a big search, and it took me like 20 years, and I found it. And now I help others have that and teach that in my own way. So that's why I recognize what you're doing as an important work and part of the message of this podcast, especially here in season 3. I'm highlighting books like yours that really make a difference for the people in the workplace. And I say it like that to emphasize the people versus the culture or the workplace. It's about the people. So your book is making a big difference. So tell us again the title of the book and then tell us the main premise of the book.
Yes, the name of the book is Conflict Intelligence Quotient, and then with a parenthesis in Conflict IQ, and it's the missing piece to turbocharge leaders and organizations' emotional intelligence. Because I realized when I was working with people that I would test them to see where was their emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence, it's very important in people, and especially when you're working with other people in the workplace. And I realized that some of these people, they were not that bad in their emotional intelligence. Nevertheless, they were very fearful about having those difficult conversations, high stake conversations. Or they will come to me and say, Yvette, I'm the director of this organization and I have not been able to sleep for many nights. I have sleepless nights because I'm having an issue with my manager, with an employee that he's overseeing, and that employee, we're concerned that they're going to go into the HR and create a formal complaint if we don't stop this. And that makes me very nervous. I would have, executive directors saying, I'm having issues with my C-suite level peers. And I'm very concerned because obviously this is going to be affecting my job if I don't resolve these issues, and I'm not able to sleep. So these were people with good levels of emotional intelligence, and that is when I started working with people, and I started building results for people, and people would say, wow, this is amazing. And even they would come to tell me that people in the workplace, they realized that something was going on with them because they were not the same. So that made me eventually to believe that I had developed this methodology to work with people, to get them to that level, to get them to a level in where they don't fear conflict. They can lean in because they not only do they have the skills, but they resolve their inner situations that was also perhaps affecting them to create more conflict in situations.
And I could see how that could help them not only at work, but at home and all other relations.
Yes.
Now that you've taught them the skills, now they can take those skills and use them wherever they go, because relationships are relationships are relationships.
Yes, I feel like that superwoman, that I am here dressed as a professional, but my real intention is to change and transform the world. Because I know that if I touch that leader in organization, any leader in organizations, they're going to go to a transformation that will also take into effect for them to become better parents, better community members, better friends, better everything in the community. And if I can create that impact on one person and create a ripple effect to anything that they will touch, it's amazing. It's amazing what I do. And I feel very, very blessed to have found this field of work and where I can create that impact. When I first started with wanting to create my consulting business, obviously I wanted all of this for everyone. And I remember, doing little seminars wherever I could in order to inspire people. But the reality is that it came to my awareness that people don't change until something very drastic change happens to them, or they're losing money, or they're losing something. And perhaps many people would change if they're inspired, they have the knowledge. So I said, okay, maybe again, if I can go into organizations and then I have to work my way around to show organizations that this was of value. And it took years. I think that in the past 4 years, with everything that we have been dealing with, companies and leaders have realized that they cannot compartment people's humanity outside, pushing humanity outside of the work. People bring their whole self into the workplace. And in the past 4 years, I have been a little bit more busy because of the fact that organizations are realizing they cannot compartment people anymore.
Yeah.
So I said, you know, if a leader or anybody in the organization is dealing with conflict in the workplace, and it's going to affect their job, their pay, their career development, that is when they're going to be paying attention to. Because if I go to my next door neighbor and say, hey, I want to create skills building, can you sit down with me and start practicing these or start thinking about this or do that? They're not going to do it. They don't have any stake in the game. They just don't. Therefore, they're not going to do it. So it took me a couple of years to realize that that is not how I was going to create the impact. The impact perhaps is going to be in the organizations and where people are seeing that something is getting affected, and then that is where I can come in, or that they want to do something better for the organization and the environment, because organizations are micro communities.
They are.
If you study social psychology, my field is a conglomerate of social psychology, anthropology. And if you realize that organizations are micro communities, you realize that people influence one another. They're constantly influencing people. So if we can create a good impact in organizations and we can create that ripple effect, we're creating better communities inside the organization. Right. And if those people are happy, they're going to be happy when they're home as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hear your commitment coming through, your passion and commitment for this work to really make an impact, to really make a difference. All right. So now let's shift gears for a minute. So that was your subject matter expert person role hat. Now put on your author role hat and consultant business owner hat and think about another person like you who has written a book. She's a consultant, business owner, high achieving, ambitious, goal oriented, doing all the things, and then wrote this book because she wants to make an impact, just like you. She wants to make an impact for people in the area of work that hopefully ripples out into life in the world. All right, with that person in mind, what's something from your life, professional, personal, any part of your life? What's some advice or some word of wisdom or a tip that you could give to the woman I just described?
Well, in my situation, what happened to me is that I was putting all of this information on the website. And you could relate to me because we're both academic, we're instructors. And a lot of people will go into my website and they would say, Yvette, that website reads more for academic people, not for the business owners. Who wants to know about what Unitive Consulting is, all the Unitive word means, and it's all about? But I would argue, I said, but that is important because, it's the meaning of where I want to take people to be and blah, 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 blah. So with that, I thought, you know what, maybe putting this in a book will be very valuable. And the fact that a lot of people will say that you have so much information, you have so much knowledge, that it will be amazing if you can put it in a book. And I would advise, the high achiever women out there or men as well, that they're consultants and they have something to say, they have something to make an impact, to not hesitate to write that book. Let me tell you, this was a self-published book with very, very little budget. Sometimes I go into podcasts and I hear all of these people, publishers and everything, saying all of this money that they have to put into a book. And I just I don't know whether to tell them how much it cost me to do it, right? And I did it professionally. Thank God I was able to find the right people and everything. And I did it clean, very professionally. It looks great, in my opinion, and not only in my opinion, but I also hear it from other people that have read it. Several executives that were like, oh my God, I had to go back and read the book 2 times, 3 times in order to get it through. And when I hear that, it's like, wow, yes, I'm making that impact. And yes, the book is written with my heart in it and well done. So I think that if you go with that passion and you push your work to be driven by the passion of what the service that you want to create in organization or in the community, I think that is where you get your ammunition and your energy to make it happen. Because I did it all pretty much myself. I was doing all the work. I was teaching, building curriculum, and then I was writing the book. And I was sleeping very little, couple of hours, but I didn't felt it. I was so much in driving passion that I didn't felt it until eventually it affected. But that's another story. But I did it. I made it happen. And there were some times at night that I would say, but what if not a lot of people read it? Because it's evident that I don't have all this amount of money for budget to give to a publisher, to give to a marketer, to market this book. What if it's just one of those books? And I told myself, if only one person read it and I'm able to change that life, even though if I never meet this person, I think it will be worth it. And I was inspired by, I don't remember the author's name, that wrote a book and that person passed away. And then eventually the book became extremely famous. So he or she, I don't remember if it was a woman or a man, wrote this book, and it wasn't in that era, but they were very futuristic. And eventually that person passed away and the book became extremely famous. So I said, who knows? I'm just going to put it out there and I'm going to say, you know what? I think organizations would benefit off of this. And not only do I know because of everything that I study, I lived it. I know what it is on both sides of the coin. And I know that the USPS uses these type of transformational conflict resolution models to work with their employees and give them choices that they can go and do a formal complaint, or they can do a formal complaint. They can also experience conflict resolution in a humanistical way where people work with them in order to figure things out. It works.
Yeah, it sounds like it does. And I'm imagining there might be some people listening now wondering where or how they can get the book and just be in touch with you in general. So where can people find the book, first of all, and then how can they connect with you?
Well, they can look me up on LinkedIn under Yvette Durazo. And if they go to LinkedIn and they send me the word peace in the message, the word peace, I'll be more than happy to send them a book. And, and that will go to the 5 people in your audience that can do that, because I don't want to leave it open because then I'll have a lot. But 5 people that can connect with me on LinkedIn and say the word peace. And then I'll ask them for the address and I will send them the book.
I love that. I love that. It's very generous of you.
Thank you. And obviously, they can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me on my website. I have a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of podcasts. If they Google my name, they'll be able to find me. I teach at various universities, so I'm not difficult to be found.
Okay.
So if they really, really, really want to work with me and bring me into an organization to help them with building their culture, creating more inclusive and work that people feel like they belong, I am available. What else? I know that certain organizations are working in bringing a more social process into their business, which also gives them accolades because they're doing that in the community. I am available to work with them so that we can create strategic ways of how to work with their employees so that they can achieve those certifications as well.
Okay, we'll be sure to put your contact information in the show notes so they can reach out to you and all the ways that you mentioned here, and also to use that word peace in LinkedIn. So I'm sure they're getting so much from this conversation, but that will be an opportunity to continue. So Yvette, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. I know you have a lot to do. You have this big event that you're working on and everything. So thank you for taking time to be here. Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robin, for inviting me over.
It's been a joy. Okay, everyone, I'd love to hear from you over at my LinkedIn at Robin L. Owens, PhD, at Robin L. Owens, PhD. Just drop a message. Let me know what you think about the podcast, your response to the episode, any questions you have. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're one of the authors we talked about who has written a book because you really have a passion and a commitment for making a difference for people at work, and yet you want to expand your message beyond the book, and you've been thinking about creating a course, but you don't know if your book is even ready for a course. Well, people have been asking me that question, so I created a checklist for them and you to answer that very question. So if you're saying, is my book ready to be turned into a course? Head on over to my website, createmasterfulcourses.com, createmasterfulcourses.com, download the free checklist, and you'll be on your way. You'll know exactly how the ways in which your course can be turned into a successful online course. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. If you enjoyed it, head on over and rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop every week, and I can't wait to hang out with you again soon. Meanwhile, this is Dr. Robin signing off. See you next time.